crazy when you really think about how everyone on this earth is a unique person. Even if you share similar backgrounds, are of the same gender or age or ethnicity, it's not the full picture. So what this really means is that every person you manage is not like you. And that makes managing humans, well, hard. Thankfully, today's guest is going to help us all better understand how to manage people who are different from us so that everyone can be their best self and do their best work. Today's guest is Stephanie Chung. Stephanie is not just a #1 international bestselling author. She's a force of strategic innovation, a beacon of change, and a titan in the world of business growth and human capital management. With over 30 years of experience, Stephanie has cultivated a reputation for turning challenges into opportunities and transforming growing businesses into thriving hubs of success. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stephanie. I'm so excited to talk with you about how to lead people who are different from ourselves, because we're all individuals. So therefore, by default, everyone on your team is different from you in some way, shape, or form. And it is so important for managers to really understand those differences and how they can be leveraged and how they can impact us in the workplace. So I'm really glad you're here today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually really excited about the conversation. As you and I were talking earlier, I love the fact that you're so focused in on managers, because at the end of the day, it's really the managers that make it all work or not work. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Maybe.
All right, let's just dive right in here and start with, what does it mean to lead people who are different from you? Like, what are we talking about when we're talking about differences, or at least the meaningful differences that you share in your book and that you think are really important for managers to understand?
Yeah, the way that I look at it, so I'll kind of back up a little bit, right? Which is, when you think about today's modern workforce, we've got 6 generations at work. That's unheard of. So that's never happened in history. So, and we know that each generation has a different perspective, different expectation, different way that they see work, right? A different work ethic, if you will. So that's dynamic number 1. Dynamic number 2, we have women as the majority of the population. So that changes the workplace dynamics, because women, we see things differently and we communicate differently. Then you have all of, if you're in the United States, at least all of the ethnic races are growing, non-ethnic race shrinking. So the demographics are changing as well. Then you couple that with, folks from the LGBTQ+, or maybe you have colleagues that have different cultures, different worldviews, or maybe people who have disabilities or neurodiversities. So at the end of the day, Mamie, we've got a plethora of differences. So people who are at work they're different than each other, and they're different than you as their manager. So with that in mind, the way that I describe differences is pretty much everyone. The reason why I wrote this book is, a lot of times every book that I would ever, pick up about this subject, it tended to focus in on, white men and trying to teach and share them how to lead women or people of color. And I felt like, okay, that's true, but it's not just them, it's everybody needs to know how to be better and more effective at leading, everyone, right? So I wanted the conversation to go much deeper and much wider. So at the end of the day, the way to answer your question is really, everyone is not like you in some shape, form, or fashion. And so the leaders who are going to win in the future and have that competitive advantage are going to be the ones who know how to lead people who are not like them, don't think like them, don't communicate like them, may not share the same generation as them or gender, etc. Everyone is not like you. And so everybody has a dog in this fight, and everyone has to level up their leadership if they want to remain relevant in the future.
I'm so glad that's where you started, because that is really what I took away from your book as well, which is we've kind of normalized that there's a normal way, and then there's the everybody else. And we're all just trying to get to the normal. And that's not really the case, right? Everyone is different, and everyone that you lead and everyone that you manage needs to be approached as an individual and understanding that person and all that comes with them and their different identities and histories. So I so appreciate that you called out that this is not just for white men. It is really for every leader, especially as we move forward in this world that is becoming more and more diverse and more disconnected because of all the virtual work. And we're talking global now, right? Like people are working across cultures, across languages, across everything. So it's so important to realize that this is not just for one person, but this is for everyone. So I just want to reinforce that I love that message so much. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. All right. So even though I love this, that how much what you're saying is about this is for everyone, I feel like we also have to talk about privilege because of that sense that there's, the white male that has privilege, or a particular race or gender or age that has privilege. So can you unpack for us why privilege isn't a dirty word? And I love that you have a whole chapter about this in your book. It was so enlightening. So can you talk about privilege and how we can approach it differently?
Thank you so much. I do. You know what? It was interesting that you brought that up, because when I was writing the book, it was during a time where people were so afraid, to use the word privilege. And I'm like, privilege is actually a pretty positive word. And we've made it a trigger point that becomes super negative. So I first will start with this. Every single person on the planet has privilege, period. Right. So once we understand that, then we can, defuse the word, if you will. So that's the first part is, if I can listen, I can go into a building, Maymay, and not worry about, is there a ramp for me to have to go up? I can go, right now I'm in a hotel room doing this interview. I don't have to worry about, is there access for me to have to read the elevators a certain way because I, perhaps can't see. So everybody has privilege, and we have to kind of stop and step into that for a moment, especially as a manager. What is your privilege and how can you use it to help other people? So when we think about privilege, I talk about, as you know, in the book, several different types of privilege. So I just use an example. Listen, if I go to rent a car, every car is built for a right-handed person. I'm right-handed, so it all works for me, right? But if you're a left-handed person, there's a lot of things not built for you that you just don't think about when you're a right-handed person. So by default, I have a privilege that I may not think about, but just because I don't think about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? If you ask a left-handed person, they could probably rattle off all kinds of privileges I have as a right-handed person. So I say that as a simplistic type of viewpoint just to kind of right-size all of us. So everybody has privilege. Now, in the book, I actually talk about, there was a situation, we talked about stories where I was able to use my proximity privilege, which is another form of privilege, for something that was a life or death situation, right? So I could go into my network because I have a strong network, just because I sell private jets, right? To be able to tap into, all right, who knows the head of blah, 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 because my husband's in the hospital, we've just had a stroke, blah, blah, blah. So privilege is something that we all have. So that's the first thing. Now, how do you use that so that you build your own awareness so that you can serve other people? The first thing I would say was, as a manager or leader, anybody in a leadership position, our job is to serve people. That's the job, right? It's to develop, I always say leaders develop leaders. And so I first have to understand, what privileges do I have? If we think about the book overall, Ally Leadership, Ally is an acronym, right? I could have called the book Allyship, but that's something different. I called it Ally Leadership because it's all about asking, listening, learning, and then you taking action. You taking action usually does involve your privilege, right? What is it that you have that they don't have that you can actually utilize to continue to grow them, develop them, et cetera? And so that's it's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, but that's something that I really want leaders to think about is, you have your privilege, you have a privilege. And let's not, continue to think of privilege like it's been presented to us out there in the sense of, oh, it's either, male, female, gay, straight, black, white, that type of thing. It's just so much more complex when you think of every single person on the planet has some level of privilege. Now, the real question as a leader is, how am I using that privilege to serve other people?
I'm so glad that you lifted up that privilege is not a bad thing and that it really is for the benefit of others, right? And if we hide from our privilege or we try to downplay or ignore it, we're actually not just doing ourselves a disservice, but we're doing our people a disservice.
Yes.
And some of those privileges that you just mentioned, I want to kind of pick back up again, right? The proximity privilege, right? The ability to reach into your network, to have a network of people who can access capital or can, make the call or give you advice or whatever it might be, right? And the thing about privilege, that is that you may have gained it through random circumstances of your birth, or you may have gained it through working really hard, but it kind of just, it's there, and it's not necessarily so true for everyone else. So when you see your team member who's struggling, right, you might be the one who has to think, who can I connect them to for a mentor, right? It's not on them only to go get help, but you can use your proximity privilege to help them like that.
Yes.
Are there other particular privileges that we as managers can really deploy in those ways to help our team members grow?
Absolutely. So let's think of, I'll take something super simple and then I'll kind of build from there, right? So something really simple could be, let's say you're taking I'll use myself as an example. So I grew up a military brat. So I didn't grow up around wealth. I was a military kid. And so when I first started getting into when I was brought into the private aviation sector, well, now you're around so much wealth, right? That I've never even seen this type of wealth before. And so now I'm invited to different dinners and so on and so forth, where there's a million sets of, silverware, right? And a gazillion glasses for all different types of wines and plates. And, so this was something I wasn't exposed to. Fortunately, though, for me, I had a manager who knew that. And so, beforehand would be like, okay, let's put her in etiquette class, right? Because that way I can learn how, all the different little nuances that I would not have been exposed to. And so, but this is something that's going to be super important for me for my role, right? Or my job when I was coming in as a manager. So that is something really, really little and simple that you can think about. If you're taking somebody, like you're going to go play golf. Well, do they know the golf course etiquette or the country club etiquette or how to dress for it? You may know it because this is your world, but they may not know it. And so don't assume that. Make sure that you're setting them up to win, right? Nobody wants to be in a situation where they're uncomfortable or an environment they're uncomfortable. So that's a little one. Now, if we build on top of that as leaders, it could be something bigger. I may have a privilege that, again, I'll use myself an example. When I was an executive, especially for publicly held companies, well, I'm media trained, right? So, only certain people are authorized to speak to the media, especially if it's a publicly held company. Well, because I have that training, that's great. But what can I do with that? Well, if I'm overseeing other leaders, well, it would be great for them to also know the different nuances, though they may not be, have the authority to speak to the media. But having that type of training certainly will help them as an effective leader, because communication is 90% of our day, right? So I can take the privilege of the training that I'm taught, and then how do I now trickle that to my people so that they can actually use that as an advantage as well? That's going to help them in their career. It's going to help them be, listen, if you know how to communicate, you're more effective in general, right? Mother, father, son, daughter, husband, wife, and then of course as a leader in your organization. So what I would encourage, especially for your listeners, is when you have the ability to be privileged enough to have certain types of exposure, don't just hoard it for yourself. How can I repackage, repurpose, and reuse that so that my people can grow and develop and or be blessed? That's something I would encourage, the listeners to really be zoned in on, because you may take it for granted, like, oh, I've got to go to this training on, I've got to go to this leadership training. Okay, that's great. What a privilege that is. But then how do I take the little nuggets within that leadership training that could actually be really helpful for my team as well? And so that's, you just have to be aware and very conscious of that kind of stuff. And then because when you do that, knowing that everybody has privilege, you're going to see a whole world open up where you can actually, again, take action to help your people continue to grow and succeed as well.
Oh my gosh, I love this so much. Not only because it means that you get to help your people, but also it's like taking that one training and going from like a small impact to like a exponential impact, right? You're taking your learnings and you're sharing them, and that just helps everyone. I love this so much.
Well, what I love about that, Mamie, too, is that you also are creating a culture that says learning is what we do here. Right. And you're leading by example as the chief learner, if you will, in this particular scenario, that it's not like, oh, I'm just learning and then, good luck to the rest of you. But it's like, no, I'm learning, and anything that I'm learning that I think can be of value to you, I'm going to share it with you. Then I would have your managers take it one step further. And now if everybody sees the managers like, oh, okay, that she or he is always open to get better, well, then that's what they're going to start striving to do. So by default, you're getting the whole whole team to level up, if you will. And then what you could take it again, even one step further is, maybe once a month in your team meetings, talk about, I'd love to hear from everybody. Like, what is one thing that you've learned this week or this month or what have you, that you think could be really valuable for the team to know? So what you're doing is you're planting the seed that learning is what we do. And it's not just I do it. No, we all do it. And then we all share because we're all going up together.
Yes. And it just reinforces that everyone has some privilege, right? Everyone is learning something. And when they feel empowered to share that with the team, right, it reinforces their value on the team. So yes, love this so much. Okay. I want to shift gears just a little bit here and talk about how do you become more aware of the things that your team members might need or know, right? Like, how would I know that someone on my team has never, been to a conference before, and therefore they might benefit from me talking them through kind of how to show up at a conference, how to effectively network, how to take advantage of the sessions they're going to, right? Like, it feels a little weird just be like, have you ever been to a conference before? Like, I'm trying to imagine if I asked that question to someone, if they would be like really upset and like feel very, like, really, you think I've never been to a conference? Or if they would feel totally fine, or is there a way to ask that? So how do we start some of these conversations?
Oh, I love that. I love that so much, right? Because here's the thing I, personally believe: the simpler, the better when it comes to communication. So I would just ask, and it may sound really bizarre, like, okay, well, that seems super simple. But so let's use the example of a conference, right, that you just put out there. So I may say something like, listen, May, I'm really excited about this conference. I've been to this conference before, and I think that you are going to be blown away by the nuggets of wisdom and information that you're going to receive. That's not just going to help you grow as an individual, but certainly help you grow as a potential leader. Now, with that said, I want to set you up to win. So tell me a little bit about any conferences that you've been to before, and where do you think that I could actually add value to you so that you can go in already coming in the right position, right posture to be able to receive and learn as much as possible. Right. So that's just a simple way that I would do it, is to, kind of let them know, because the reason why I think that you felt a little weird saying it is because there was no setup, right, on the front end. Like, hey, I want you to succeed. I want to make sure I set you up to win. I know there's a lot of information there, but tell me, how can I help you, right, in order to get that win accomplished? So just asking the question in a way that not positions you in the center as the leader, but positions them in the center so that they can see your heart. Because so much of, and I hope that when you read my book, you gathered this, I do believe that when you're leading people, period, but also especially when you're leading people who are not like you, it is a head and heart issue. Right. And so if people can see your heart then they'll give you a lot of grace. If you ask a question that, may feel a little kind of awkward or uncomfortable, they'll give you grace because they can see your heart is there. Right. If they can't see your heart's there, then that's when people, all kind of, walls go up, and that's a whole different conversation for a different day. But as leaders, if we can really show people that, we care about you head-wise, sure, but we also care about you heart-wise, then most people, I find, when they know your heart's in the right place, they know your intentions are well, then they're gonna posture themselves in a certain way as well, so that they won't be offended. They're gonna realize, like, oh, okay, she's just trying to help me out here, and so yeah, let me contribute with how could she help me, right? That's a whole different interaction than if not.
Yes, and the context, as you're saying, and the setup matters so much, and that show of, I'm here to support you. I'm not here to tell you everything. I'm not here to question your authority. What I want to do is actually be helpful in this scenario. So let's figure out together how I can be helpful.
Yes.
So perfect. Okay, let's shift gears again and go back to the ally approach that you mentioned earlier. Can you walk us through this process in a little more detail and how we can use it to lead people who are not like us even more effectively?
Yeah, so I would start with first, once upon a time, I would always use the word empathy. And I think, it's a word that all of us use, especially in leadership. And we do need empathy. But I've started to switch my word, Mamie, and I don't use as much empathy now as much as I use curiosity. And here's why. So the secret to leading people who are not like you is to be curious about them. not come in and talk to them about how you see the world, right? But really to be curious about, well, how do they see the world? Because their world's different than yours, right? And so that's the first thing. Now, when we think about being curious, the best analogy I can give is if anybody has ever traveled abroad. It could be, and abroad doesn't mean, you went overseas somewhere. It could be you just went to a different state or a different neighborhood, depending on, how much you travel. But if you've ever gone into a place that everyone's not like you, okay? And usually when you travel abroad, that tends to be the case. Well, what happens is the reason why you're going there is other than work, right, is that you're curious about whether, is that lifestyle or, like they're much more calm over there, or maybe they have a lot more things going on, whatever it is. But when you go to a place that no one's like you, usually tends to be travel related, then you go in with the level of curiosity. So you're asking the locals, where does everybody eat around here? Or like, where are you? Tell me a little bit about you. Or you're learning about the culture. You're very curious. So you've positioned yourself to learn, right? Mm-hmm. Now, let's take this back to leadership and let me answer the question that you specifically asked. So if you take that curiosity stance that you use when you travel someplace else, use that same curiosity when you're just talking to someone else. Now, all of a sudden, you're asking questions you don't know the answer to, which is really key because a lot of times leaders ask questions that they actually already know the answer to. So we want to get really good at asking questions, the questions we don't know the answer to. Because what that will do is if I ask you a question I don't know the answer to, but then by default, I'm going to listen because I don't know the answer, right? If I ask and I listen, like truly listen, by default, I'm going to learn. So now I've asked, I've listened, I've learned. Now I have to do something with it. Right? We don't need you just enlightened. We need you to activate. Okay. So that's why the ally framework is so important, is that I want leaders to realize it's not just about asking or not just about listening, but you have to do all of it. Ask, listen, learn, and then you take action. That's how you get to be better positioned to be able to lead people who are not like you. So now if we think about just your day-to-day managers at work, simple things that you can do. Like one thing I always tell leaders is, I think where people get a little nervous about interacting with people who are not like them is it becomes this, just daunting thing, right? And we don't need it to be, because if any of you have little kids, this is what they do all day. Literally all day, right? And they're not thinking about it because that is our natural born instinct, is to actually be curious about others that are not like us. And so, life beats that out of us. And then, by the time we get to manager levels and above, we're a little less inclined to be curious. But I would really encourage really effective managers nowadays are really about, I want to be super curious. I want to get to know as much about you as I possibly can. So one thing that I personally do, just because I don't want this to be complicated, is, I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, or maybe like a month ago, my husband and I, where I live in Dallas, there is a Thai kind of Buddhist neighborhood. Okay. And I'd never been there before. And on Sundays, what they do is all the different folks from the Buddhist, community will come and cook. And then you can go and buy food from them. And all the money goes back to helping the Buddhists and all the nonprofits and how they serve their community. Right. So it's a win-win. You get great homemade Thai food. And then you also get to, your money goes to good causes. Now, I went and did that, not because I had this urge for Thai food, but because I was like, you know what? I want to put myself in a community that no one looks like me, thinks like me, communicates like me, because now I can go in a posture of curiosity. And so I was able to, hang out and watch the monks and talk to monks and, just be in the botanical garden and enjoy delicious food and then talk to other people who were there. That was just a Sunday. It took me a couple of hours. But what did that do? Well, it expanded my mind, right? Because I had to ask, listen, learn. And now all of a sudden I can use this as an example for other leaders of what is it that you do all the time? No matter where you live, there is a community nearby that not everyone looks like you. So go visit that. Go look at their galleries and their art museums, or maybe they have festivals, or just hang out in their restaurants, right? You have to position yourself to be curious enough so that kind of curiosity, you're going to feed the curiosity because you're a manager. You're built different. You make things happen, right? You're going to feed all of that. But now if you get into a normal habit of I'm constantly curious, and then I'm not just curious and like wondering, but I'm actually activating and doing something about that curiosity, by default, that's going to give you a competitive advantage in general when it comes to leading people, but especially leading people who are not like you. Because the facts are clear. I'm going to go on a tangent now for a second. The facts are clear. Diverse teams simply outperform. You don't have to take my word, Google it. Go find it from McKinsey, Deloitte, Harvard Business Review, wherever. You don't have to look hard to get the stats. But they're only effective when led well. So if I just look at a high level, diverse teams, so people who don't think alike, look alike, act alike, have the same communication skills, same generation, gender, et cetera, they're going to be 35% more productive. Teams that are diverse are 70% more likely to actually capture new markets. And diverse teams are 36% more profitable. Now, let me just stop there. As a leader, your job is to make sure that you're bringing in and we all have a responsibility, whether it's to the board, to the CEO, to your investors, to your customers, to your employees, whatever. As leaders, our job is to make sure that we've got the best people in the best position to create the best result. Well, statistically, that's going to be people who are not like you. And so how you do that and get a competitive edge as a manager, especially knowing that the world is global, is you simply have to know how to lead people who don't think like you, look like you, act like you, and communicate like you, or have the same background as you. If you go in it with that kind of attitude, then how I open myself up, Maymay, to learn from others becomes really quite simple. Because again, if you watch a typical 5-year-old in the playground, they're doing it all day with little to no effort, right? And so we can do the same thing. We just have to have our mindset ready to do it.
Oh my gosh. You make it sound so easy. Just embrace curiosity, go in with an open mind, ask those questions, listen and learn, and then do something with it. And
if I can go one step further too, I would challenge, people that I coach and mentor, I'm like, I challenge, they got a challenge every week, right? So through my online programs. And one of the challenges that I share with leaders is like one week it might be, what I want you to do is pay attention to what you pay attention to. So do you always give the benefit of the doubt to a certain person or certain people? Or do other people always get your doubt? Right? Pay attention. Who do you have in that meeting? Who do you not have in the meeting? When they speak, how does the rest of the meeting respond to when they speak? Are they allowed to speak? Do they speak in the meeting, right? You just have to be aware, because once you're aware of the situation, then you're going to go and make the proper adjustments. Again, you're a leader, right? Like that's what you do. But most leaders right now, and listen, I'm not poo-pooing on leaders. I'm a leader as well. And so I know it's really, really busy and hard right now. There's just so many demands. But how we make it easier on ourselves is activate the entire team. Not just the ones that we're used to, not just the ones that we're most comfortable with, but the entire team. And so how do I make sure that if somebody's on the team that tends to be really quiet, that never speaks up in the meeting, well, how do I create a safe enough environment that he or she feels comfortable enough to speak up in the meeting? How do I challenge the team to challenge my thought process? How do I have the team get into a mindset of your job is to challenge the status quo? That's the only way we get better. How do I create that environment? Well, I create that environment first being quite aware of how I lead and how I function, but then also being and creating an environment where everyone can succeed as they are, right? They don't need to become like me. I don't want them to come like me. I want them to succeed as they are. But as a leader, I have to create that environment. It's not their job to create the environment. I have to create that environment. So that means I have to be super aware. I've got to pay attention to what I pay attention to. So if someone's not talking or someone's not at the meeting, or I have to be aware of that so that I can make the proper adjustments.
It's being curious about yourself, right? Being curious about what you're noticing. So yes, curiosity once again. All right, but we do have to wrap up here. So Stephanie, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
I would, this is easy actually. His name was Fred, and I really enjoyed working for him. And the reason why is he was very gentle, gentle in the sense of if you messed up, he wasn't like, he wasn't that guy, right? There are times that he would be that guy. But for the most part, his whole focus was he would tell you, direct one-on-one. Like I'll give you an example. One time I had to go let somebody go. which I did. He was my CEO. So, and once I let the person go, what happened is it was a really, in our company, it was a very orchestrated event. Like when someone had to be terminated, then all the equipment was turned off at the same time and the email went out at the same time. It was very orchestrated, right? So that, we didn't have any loose holes kind of out there. So this particular day when I had to go and let this gentleman go, everything was ready to go on my computer, right? Email was ready to go, blah, blah, blah. Well, my computer crashed. And so now all of a sudden I'm, in the car trying to type up this email and I've only got like a minute tops to get it out there because everything's timed wise. So I just, instead of doing this long, beautiful email about, how great the person was, because they were just the wrong fit. It wasn't like they were a bad person, right? I didn't have all that kind of time. So it's just kind of like, so-and-so is no longer here. We wish them the best, right? It was kind of one of those short and sweet type of emails, and push send and get it out because I was focused on hitting the deadline. And what I wasn't focused in on was making sure this guy's dignity was kept intact. And so when the CEO, who I admired, pulled me in the office, is like, how did it go? Blah, blah, blah. And I was having that conversation. He says, I wanted to share with you, I noticed that when you sent the email, it really wasn't consistent with your brand. And so he brought it up. He said it felt a little cold. And so, and he was right. He didn't know all the stuff that had happened up until that point. But at least I loved the fact that he knew that wasn't consistent with my brand. And that he didn't just kind of like, oh, okay, I wonder what was going on with her that day. But actually took the time to pull me aside and then have the conversation with me, ask, listen, learned. My computer died. I had 30 seconds to get it out, right? All that stuff. And then, he took action enough to care enough for me to give me the truth and give it to me straight. And so that's the type of leader that I personally tend to resonate with is, leaders who are not afraid, they're good with healthy confrontation. He was one of those leaders who would actually create that type of environment. So he would come in, all of us on the executive team, he'd throw out some kind of challenge. I'd always say he'd throw in a bomb and then let it explode and then he'd leave while we got to figure out how to clean it all up, right? But what it did is it made us as a unit, a C-suite executive team, we functioned very, very well. And so we had good, healthy disagreements. But, once we walked out those doors, we were all together in one accord. And so he just really was very good. And I admired it and I learned from him. You do want to create a space where people can challenge you. They can challenge the status quo. But he was a leader who did that quite well. He would always pick to make sure that every voice was, good, bad, or indifferent, that was heard. And then if somebody had a differing opinion, that they stood there and defended it. Right? Don't have a differing opinion and then just go, okay, well, never mind. We can do it your way. No. Wait, your opinion was different. So now defend it. Right? And so that because maybe we're all wrong. Maybe you're right. So he just really did a great job creating an environment where people could be themselves. You truly could bring your whole self to work and then not have to have any fear of retribution.
Beautiful. Sounds wonderful. And where can people learn more about you? Remind us the name of your book and where people can get it.
Yes, sure. So you can get the book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. It's sold anywhere that books are sold. Amazon obviously tends to be the most popular. And then in regards to your second question, yes, you can go to stephaniechung.com or you can hit me up on any of the socials. My social call is at the Stephanie Chung. As well as, I have a newsletter on Substack called Your Ally in Leadership because I'm super passionate about helping leaders. I know it's tough out there. So how can I help them? And my whole focus is not just basic leadership skills and communication sets. That's important, but also I tend to focus in on the neuroscience part of it as well, right? So, how do we take leadership? And there's so much information out there now from a cognitive behavior perspective. How can you use that to give you a competitive advantage as a leader? So how do you build trust? What's happening in someone's brain when you're having a conversation that's creating positive chemicals that makes that conversation much more pleasant so that the trust is built much more faster? Those types of things. So you can join my weekly newsletter and get all kind of good nuggets. YourAllyInLeadership.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today, Stephanie. Really a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.